So, so let me introduce our presenter, Garrett. So Garrett Costin, he's a LICSW and a SUDPT. And after gaining several years of valuable experience in both inpatient and outpatient behavioral health in medical settings as a social worker and clinician, Garrett now works as a behavioral health consultant. He facilitates workshops and trainings on person-centered and trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, medication-assisted recovery, and many other topics. He is energized by transformative, person-centered approaches that aim to reduce disparities and inequities in healthcare and society. So hopefully you guys got that PDF I sent you, but I actually, I have the link here. I could put it in the chat as well once kind of Garrett gets started. He said it would just be helpful if you guys wanted to follow along with it. But without further ado, this is Garrett.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Brianna and Jason. It is always nice to be with this group and presenting for Walker. I am really pleased that you're all able to join us today, especially since we had to reschedule the date. And I know that we're all likely also thinking ahead to the 4-day weekend or the 3-day weekend with the 4th of July. But I'm really pleased that you found the time to be together with us this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Here we go. If there's ever any issues with somebody's not able to see anything or you're not able to hear, please send a message in the chat box to Brianna, and she'll be monitoring the chat box and able to hopefully help us figure out any technical issues that might come up. This is Stages of Change, Understanding the Framework and Primary Tasks for Recovery Residents as they progress through the process of change, making healthier behavior changes. And as Brianna said, I'm Garrett Costin, and I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to share some information and exchange ideas with you all. So this is the overview for our time together this morning. First of all, we will start with just real basic Stages of Change 101, introducing and defining the Stages of Change model. Then I'll give a little bit of information about the history and the development of the model, how it's come together and evolved over the past several decades. And then we're going to get into a little bit of behavioral change psychology, just a couple of slides to help ground us in the psychology of behavioral change before we take a deeper dive and look at each of the 6 stages of change more closely. And after we finish talking about all 6 of the stages, we will, towards the end, I have a couple of slides just to let you know that there's much more about the stages of change than what can be included in a 90-minute presentation. So I just want to leave you with a couple of final important points and mention a couple of other things about stages of change for folks that might be interested in doing a little more research on their own. And then I have a slide that lists some tools and resources if you feel inspired to sort of utilize the stages of change framework in your recovery setting, or if you're working with individuals who you think might be interested in getting some information about the stages or doing some worksheets and things like that that can help them progress through the stages smoothly. And we'll end with some questions and answer and discussion at the end. I do want to take this opportunity because I know that, and I'm really grateful that there's people who participate in these webinars regularly. And as I was putting this webinar together, I realized, well, we have so much information for this topic, and it's also not really a topic that lends itself well to doing activities or role plays or discussions in the middle. So I want to just set your expectations for that at the beginning. This is more of a didactic webinar, but at any time, if you have questions or comments, please do put them in the chat box. Brianna will monitor that. She'll make me aware if there's anything urgent, and she'll save some of those questions or comments for the end when we have time. to have more of a regular open discussion, and people will be welcome to unmute themselves at that time or just put your comments and questions in the chat box. So let's dive in. Let's get started. So the stages of change. First of all, I want to share this visual representation. I am really interested. I feel like I'm sort of a collector or an archivist of various visuals for the stages of change. This is one of my favorites. I like that this represents the stages of change as a cycle rather than a step-by-step linear process. And I imagine that most of you at least have heard of the stages of change, or you're somewhat familiar with some of the stages. You will definitely be more familiar by the end of this 90 minutes. But we can see here with this visual, it's not really clear with this one where we start, but typically we start right at the top with the first stage, which is pre-contemplation, when somebody is unaware of reasons to change and is not thinking about changing at all. They have no intention to change their behavior. And you can see we go through to the next stage is contemplation. After that, preparation, where people are starting to get ready for change, and then action, actually taking some small steps and putting in the action part to behavior change. After somebody graduates to the next stage, they're at the point where they are working to maintain their achievements and sustain their new behaviors, make their new behaviors sort of part of their regular routine and daily habits. And also the stages of change recognizes that relapse is a normal occurrence. People fall back into old patterns of behavior, there's slips and relapse. However, it's not seen as the end of the road with stages of change. If someone relapses, then the next step is to get them to progress through the stages of change again and learn lessons from the last relapse, and hopefully progress through the stages faster with more awareness and new lessons learned. So part of this presentation, I'm going to be sharing different visuals, but this is the first one that I wanted to introduce you all to. Here's another one that is pretty simple, and also is accurate. It's an accurate visual representation of the stages of change, but in a very different format. So rather as a circular cycle, here we see almost as a upside down hierarchy. So we would start at the top with pre-contemplation, and you can see they sort of say that that's analogous to no, I'm not changing. I have no reason to change. I'm not motivated to change. And then the next stage, contemplation, is maybe I can see some reasons to change. I might be interested in changing in the future or at some point, I don't know. Preparation is preparing and planning you're setting your intention for change, and gathering the information and the support and the resources that you need to embark on that change. The action stage is then doing. Maintaining is continue doing and keep going, solidify your gains and your behavior changes. And this visual also has relapse at the bottom. It doesn't look like relapse is one of the stages here, but I'm glad that it's there with the upward arrow saying when relapse happens, you start back up at the top and go through the changes again. All is not lost. So a little brief intro to the stages of change. I'm going to need to figure out how to, there we go. All right, so the stages of change is the colloquial way that we talk about this framework. The formal or academic name for it is actually the trans-theoretical model of behavior change. That is the literal professional terminology. The trans-theoretical model of behavior change, often abbreviated as TTM. And it's commonly known as the stages of change. And it's a way of explaining the various stages that anyone, typically must go through during their process of making healthy changes to their behavior. The stages of change, or the trans-theoretical model, has been called arguably the dominant model of health behavior change, having received unprecedented research attention. I'll explain how this model was originally created specifically with the recovery community in mind. But similar to motivational interviewing, it's since been brought into other health fields, and it's been found to be helpful and applicable to most other fields of health as well. And the trans-theoretical model, or the stages of change model, what it does is it assesses an individual's readiness to act on making behavioral changes to become healthier. And it also provides individuals and those who support them with strategies that can help guide the individual through the stages. And so what's happening is I'm trying to move my little window of participants so that I can read all the text. There we go. So an important point before we go further, that although the stages of change can explain the process that people go through as they're attempting to make change, the stages of change model does not explain why people change. It's more about, it explains how people change, what tasks need to be completed in order to move forward in the process of change. But we need to rely on other theories and frameworks to bring in the piece about why people change. So at this time, I have the one multimedia component that we're going to have for this presentation is a short video from Very Well Mind, and it's less than 2 minutes, but it gives a pretty good summary of a lot of what I just explained about the stages of change, but in a different format and with visuals. So let me make sure the sound is gonna work here. Nope, still didn't do it. There we go. All right, so this is a link that's included on the resources page, but this is the website Very Well Mind. And in their section of their website on behavioral psychology, they have a pretty good, easy to understand, easy to follow guide to the stages of change. And we're going to take a look at this graphic a little later. But for now, let's watch the video.
The stages of change model, also known as the trans-theoretical model, has been found to be an effective aid in understanding how people go through a change in behavior, like losing weight or quitting cigarettes. The model was formed in the late 1970s by researchers James Prochaska and Carlo Di Clemente, and has 6 distinct stages. Phase 1 is pre-contemplation. Here, a person is not considering change at all. They may even be in denial of a problem. Phase 2 is contemplation, when a person becomes more aware of the benefits, but also the costs. Phase 3 is preparation. A person in this phase might experiment with small changes and begin to prepare for larger life changes ahead. Phase 4 is action. Here, a person begins to take direct action in order to accomplish their goals. Phase 5 is maintenance, where they successfully avoid former behaviors and keep up new ones. And the final phase 6 is relapse. This is a common occurrence in any type of behavior change and can cause a person to experience feelings of failure and disappointment. While relapses can be difficult, the best solution is to start again without being too hard on yourself. Making a change in your behavior and making it stick is not always an easy task. The key to success is to not let setbacks undermine your self-confidence. Remember that change occurs gradually, and relapses are an inevitable part of the process.
You're on mute.
Yeah, you're muted.
There we go. So I get a chance to consider if I really wanted to say that or not. Hopefully that video was helpful for everyone and interesting. I like that video not only because it uses cute visuals and it's pretty fast paced, but also because it helps us remember that the stages of change is not something that's necessarily specific to the substance use field, that this is the stages of change can help us conceptualize and understand all sorts of behavioral change. Okay, so getting back to the slides. A little bit about the history and development of the stages of change. The two originators, the two guys that you'll hear a lot about when you study the stages of change are Prochaska and Di Clemente, James Prochaska and Carlo Di Clemente. One of them is with the University of Rhode Island, and I believe the other is the University of Maryland. So they're both on the East Coast. They developed the trans-theoretical model of change, or stages of change model, in the early 70s, and the first publication was in 1977. They researched their theories and did their work by observing smokers who were attempting. They were all smokers who were motivated to try to quit, and they followed and did observations and interviews with smokers who were able to quit on their own and those who required further treatment or additional support in order to be successful with quitting. And sort of the final analysis of their observation studies was that they realized that people quit smoking if and when they are ready to do so. If they are not ready to do so, they're not going to change. And so this is also very related to the common cliche or saying, meet people where they're at. If somebody is not interested or even aware of any reasons to change or benefits of changing, it's probably going to be futile to try to engage them in a conversation about change. And the reason that it's called the trans-theoretical model is because it is based on various theories and concepts that come from both psychotherapy and psychology. So that trans-theoretical term really means going across different theories and across fields of psychology and psychotherapy to sort of grab the best things that can help us understand and explain the process of human behavior change. So some of the other areas besides substance use that the trans-theoretical model has been researched and has been found to be applicable and reliable include stress management, medication adherence, depression prevention or management, weight management, chronic illness management, condom use, and increasing physical activity. There have been studies of programs or initiatives that have targeted all of these types of behavior change. And as people are studied, how do they go about making changes? It's found that it's pretty close to the stages of change model, as the model explains. One of these points here is about chronic illness management. Last year, in 2021, I did a lot of medical social work with Valley Medical Center in King County, and I actually taught both motivational interviewing and the stages of change model for health coaches working at Valley Medical Center who were paired with patients who were newly diagnosed with diabetes. And folks that it was pretty important for them to consider and attempt some behavior changes in order to manage their chronic diagnosis. In this case, it was diabetes. And I found that the stages of change model fit just as well and was just as helpful in working with those physical health coaches as it has been for me in working with folks in recovery from substance use. All right, so 2 slides going, just skimming the surface of behavioral change psychology, looking at, first of all, why don't people change? Why don't people change more often? Why don't people change when it's obvious to everyone around them that a change would do them good? And secondly, we will look at how do people change for people that do make changes. What is it? What's their secret? What is necessary for them? So first of all, why don't people change? The 3 primary concepts or reasons that people don't change more often or more readily comes down to resistance, ambivalence, and effort. Resistance is, so we can think of these things as challenges or things that we need to struggle with in order to be successful with change. Resistance is actually something that I admire, because resistance is really us asserting our autonomy and our independence and our right to be in control over our own life and our own actions, along with the consequences that may come. But with resistance, it's really that our human nature as human beings is to resist when we are told to do something or we feel someone is trying to control us. We do this in order to, as I said, assert our independence, our autonomy. We don't want to, we don't, as human beings, we don't like feeling that we are powerless or under the control of another, or that we are being shamed for our behaviors. And in the recovery community, these are the types of natural, instinctual attitudes that are often termed denial. Somebody can be characterized as being in denial when they're expressing their resistance. This one is also something that when you do encounter somebody who you might characterize as being in denial, that you take a second to remember that the vast majority of us, as just with the base commonality of being human beings, the majority of us do not like to be told what to do, and we react defensively when we feel directly confronted or challenged over our behavior. So it's something to be aware of. It's also something to respect in a way. You can see the visual here. I like this picture of the little boy with his fingers in his ears. He's not going to listen to the adults that are telling him what to do. He's not open to considering their input. He's asserting himself and his independence. The next factor that makes change difficult and less frequent is ambivalence. It's having mixed feelings about something, being on the fence about it, knowing that there may be some reasons to change, but there's also a lot of reasons why I'm comfortable with not changing, why I'm not eager to change. So ambivalence is when you start to become aware of opposing forces, of sort of being on the fence. And ambivalence is also something that needs to be resolved if somebody is going to move past the second stage, the contemplation stage. Ambivalence is very useful, very valuable. It's the grist for the mill of the contemplation stage of when somebody is considering change. But that ambivalence does need to be resolved in favor of actually making the change if someone's going to move from stage 2 to 3. And finally, effort, the factor of effort, the effort that is required, and the intensity of the effort and the duration of that effort that is required to make successful change is often underestimated. People have an inaccurate understanding or assumption about how difficult the change is going to be or how long it's going to take. And over time, their optimism lowers, their motivation wanes, they feel fatigued. They feel like maybe this isn't all worth it. This is much more difficult than I expected. And I don't know if I want to make all the effort. So the counter to all this, to answer the question, well, in the face of resistance, ambivalence, and effort, how we know that people are successful at making healthier change. What are the factors of that? So the things that are necessary for people to change are these 3 factors: motivation, or actually it's 2, motivation and self-determination. And then the stages of change describes the steps that one goes through once they have sufficient motivation and self-determination. So motivation really comes from having found tapping into a source of energy and a sense of direction from inside the person. Motivation is about the persistence to accomplish things, no matter how long or how difficult it is. There's also a difference between intrinsic or internal motivation and extrinsic or external motivation. The intrinsic motivation is much more powerful and useful in helping somebody be motivated to embark on change. rather than external motivation. And again, this has to do with human beings' drive to be independent and autonomous. When people come up with their own reasons for change and their own motivating factors that are getting them energized for thinking about change, they feel more empowered and they can sort of own their upcoming change. But when it's external motivation, it's often feels like pressure. It could be the threat of consequences. You could lose your kids, you could go back to jail, you could lose your housing if you don't change. All of those are motivating factors that could motivate someone for change, but they're also all external. And yeah, as I said, it's going to be someone's going to be much more likely to have success if they have even more internal motivation than external. Self-determination is the other primary concept necessary for successful behavior change. And self-determination is really the right combination of autonomy, an individual's own sense of their own competence and ability, and sufficient and appropriate support from others or from the community. So with that background, we'll now look a bit closer at each stage. And I can see just most people have their cameras off, which is fine, but I saw a couple of people with their cameras on and it looked like they were being quite serious, ready to take notes. That is fine. If I mean, I feel honored that you're eager to retain this information. But as Brianna said, we will send you all of these slides and a couple of PDFs. So whichever way is most useful for you, feel free, but we'll going through the stages one by one. So the first stage is pre-contemplation, which, as described a bit earlier, is when somebody is not even considering change, or they have considered change and they've rejected that change is going to happen for them at this time. They are pretty comfortable with the way things are, and they are unwilling or unable to consider change at this time. You can see here there's examples for each stage, but someone who's at the pre-contemplation stage you might hear something like some of these quotes from that person. I'm not going to quit smoking. It's the only thing I enjoy anymore. Or I can't live without my pain pills. I won't consider even think about living without my pain pills. Using meth is the only way I can enjoy sex. Heroin doesn't make any problems for me. It's not the substance or my use of it that's making any problems. It's everyone else's reaction to my using the substance that causes problems. So someone with any of these attitudes is likely in the pre-contemplation stage. They're expressing a lot of resistance and denial, and yet it is comforting to know that they are at a necessary stage for change to eventually occur. So what do we do? How do we work with? How do we appropriately support someone who's at this stage where they are pretty comfortable with the way things are and determined that no changes should be made? Well, the primary task that for someone at this stage is to raise their awareness, to have their awareness raised, basically about the benefits of change and possibly the consequences of not changing. So some interventions or tasks that support staff, that people that work with folks in recovery can employ include offering neutral, factual information. And I specify after receiving permission. We know that unsolicited advice and unsolicited information is usually feels offensive and can raise people's guard. We don't like being given information that makes us feel that we're being shamed or criticized for our behavior. So it often works much better if you say, hey, would you mind, how would you feel if I shared some information with you about the effects of heroin or the long-term effects of meth use? and trying to do so in a very neutral and factual space, not alarmist or trying to scare someone. Also, what we can do with someone at this point is to gently explore and help them explore the meaning and the value of the substance in the individual's life. What is the meaning of it for them? What is it helping them achieve, or what is it doing for them? Where's their attachment coming from? What does the attachment look like? It's also interesting and useful to explore previous attempts to change for an individual at the pre-contemplation stage. Have they ever embarked on change? How did it go? What worked for them? What helped them? We did a webinar about a month ago on motivational interviewing. So I made a couple of references to MI here, or motivational interviewing skills. The motivational interviewing skills of open-ended questions are very useful with somebody at stage 1. Open-ended questions to help them explore the pros and cons of substance use or their targeted behavior. And also motivational interviewing reflective listening skills that can really help highlight and amplify change talk when we hear. If we do elicit a reason for change or a consequence of not changing from the individual, we can use reflections to sort of highlight and reflect that back to them. And hopefully what we're starting to do is encouraging that person to make it to stage 2, which is contemplation. At this point, someone understands the possibility of change. They understand the benefits of change, the potential benefits, and the reasons for change, but they're still very ambivalent and uncertain about whether trying change is the right thing for them to do at this time. And some examples of what you might hear people say at stage 2 are things like, I'd like to cut down on my use. This is an acknowledgement that change could be good, but there's no commitment to change yet. Just thinking out loud, yeah, I'd like to be able to cut down. I would save money. It would probably be safer and healthier for me. I need less time to recover every day. So it's starting to weigh some of the benefits of change. The next example, I've got what it takes to quit using meth, but I'm just not ready yet. This person is discovering their self-efficacy and increasing their confidence that they could probably be successful with change if they felt ready. The next one, if I stop drinking so much, I'd probably lose some weight. Yes, sort of a tangential benefit of change in reducing here alcohol use is that, yes, also you'd probably lose some weight. That is a good reason to weigh on the pros and cons in favor of change. And I'd probably have a better relationship with my family if I got sober. That's something I can hear echoes of in my head from many conversations with folks who are in the contemplation stage. So ways to help support somebody at stage 2, at the contemplation stage, where the primary task is for them to resolve that ambivalence. And it's not only resolving that ambivalence, but resolving that ambivalence in favor of choosing change, making a commitment to change, getting ready for change to occur. And the things that we can do are work to explore and amplify the person's own sense of self-efficacy. So this is about their personal abilities, what they have the power to achieve. And we can use our motivational interviewing affirmations to increase and boost up someone's self-confidence, self-efficacy. It's also helpful at this stage to be realistic and explore someone's expectations of what change would include, how hard it would be, the time frame, and what all would change. We have the primary change of continuing to stay away from opioid pills, but also helping someone think, what are all the other things in your life that are going to be affected by this change? Doing this is a way to help set accurate expectations and basically set someone up for success rather than failure and frustration. At stage 2, we can also use our motivational interviewing summaries or summarization skills to collect and then repeat back an individual's reasons for change and any self-motivational statements that we've heard in our conversation with them. And it's also helpful to sort of support them in directing their focus in continuing to explore the pros and the cons. All right, remember, if there's, I don't see anything coming into the chat box, but I just want to remind you that if you have any questions or comments that are burning, feel free to put them in the chat box. If you feel I'm going too fast, or you'd like me to clarify something, or you just have a response, feel free to chat back through the chat box. So once the primary tasks of resolving influence and making a commitment to change have been achieved, an individual is then ready to move on to stage 3, preparation. This stage 3 preparation, also sometimes it's referred to as the determination stage. So at this stage, somebody is preparing, they're gathering what they need, they're packing their bag to set out on the journey of change, but they're also solidifying their determination. They are getting really clear that change is something that not only are they interested in, but that they're going to get started on soon, in the near future. Some examples of statements that you might hear that would be indicators that somebody is at this stage include, "It's really not helping me at work, and I'm afraid of losing my kids." What we can hear in this sentence is actually 2 reasons why somebody has determined change would be good for them. The next one, "I'm thinking of writing up a taper schedule to help me out when I do decide to quit." So this person hasn't taken any major steps yet, but they have thought about, well, something that would help me when I am ready to change is to reduce my use gradually over time, so I don't have such a difficult withdrawal. That's a form of preparation. The next statement, "I'm working on my stress, and when it's better, I don't think I'll need the pills anymore." So this person has connected their use of maybe benzodiazepines is related to their stress. And maybe that's something they've told themselves and others when they're at the pre-contemplation or contemplation stage. They've said, I have to have the pills, I have too much stress. But someone at the preparation stage now, they are actively learning about and practicing strategies to manage their stress. And they're telling themselves that, well, if I can get my stress down, then I probably wouldn't need those pills as much anymore. This is somebody you can clearly see that change is starting to manifest in their thinking, and they're preparing for it. And the last one, "I've been talking with a friend who got sober, and she's going to help me." So this is an example of somebody who's gathering input from others who have been successful with that change. They're getting inspiration, they're getting information, and they're also sort of contracting for support if and when they themselves are ready to embark on that change. So the primary task at this stage of preparation and determination is to identify appropriate change strategies, identify what you think based on your experience and your personal preferences is most likely to work for you. For different people, that might include, well, I need to know where I can go to meetings, or I need to know what time online meetings are. So because I think 12 steps is going to be important for me. Or it might be identifying that I really need to go into counseling and learn some stress management skills, because my use and the amount I use is really related to the stress I experience in my life. The interventions, the activities that staff and peers in recovery residences can use to support somebody at stage 3 to keep them moving along towards the action stage is to use your motivational interviewing affirmations to validate and encourage the small steps that somebody at stage 3 is going to be thinking about, or possibly even already taking those small steps. And further sussing out and identifying the not only the pros and cons of change, but also the pros and cons of different options for change. I come from a strong harm reduction background, so I think, you know, a very valid change goal might be, I want to reduce my use from 1 gram a day to 0.5 gram a day. I think that that's a worthy goal. That might not be the ultimate end goal that I think would be best for the person in my mind, but that would be a huge change if somebody wants, you know, becomes determined and motivated to work on making that change. So I'm going to help them identify the pros and cons of that change, even if it's not complete abstinence. The next thing that others can do to support someone at stage 3 is to check in with them about what barriers are they encountering, and help them problem solve or strategize some ways to overcome those barriers, and also to successfully access sources of recovery support. So someone, for example, might come home from a 12-step meeting and let you know that that meeting just wasn't for me. It was all these people that, you know, totally different from me. I was bored with what they were talking about. It wasn't helpful at all. I guess 12 steps isn't going to be for me. Well, what somebody in the recovery residence can do is say, remind somebody that every 12-step meeting is different. The culture is very variable. Hey, look, there's actually another meeting taking place in a different part of town tomorrow. What do you think about maybe trying that one out? Next is to help the individual identify and enlist social support if they're having difficulty sort of building or pulling together a support team. And finally, encouraging someone at the preparation and determination stage to actually publicly announce their plans to change, to broadcast that. This actually helps folks feel like they are, to announce their commitment to change. It actually solidifies it and helps it become more real. It's helping them have some accountability. Asking somebody to publicly announce their plans to change at stage 1 or stage 2 would really be inappropriate, because they haven't cemented their determination or found all the necessary motivation yet. But late in stage 3, something we can do that helps people move from stage 3 into stage 4 is to make that public declaration that I'm about to, or I've already begun working on change. All right. Looks like somebody figured out the way to draw some blue lines there. That's fine. Just have to ignore that if it's distracting to you. Okay, so at this point, we're halfway through the stages of change model. We can come back and look at this, our little visual with all the circles here. We have gone through pre-contemplation, stage 1, contemplation, stage 2, and we've just finished discussing preparation, stage 3. Before we go into the later 3 stages, I just wanted to break it up a little bit. Now's a good time to stretch. Put your pen down if you're taking notes, and just relax for a moment. I included a couple, just one more slide here of a visualization of the stages of change. Remember, I told you that I sort of like to collect these. It's really geeky, but I'm really fascinated at looking at different charts and visual ways that people come up with to represent or explain the stages of change. And I really like this one because it is totally in the context of physical health change. But we can see that the stages of change and the tasks, the things that people do at each stage are very similar, whether it's stopping smoking, stopping heroin injection, or stopping, making dietary changes, reducing processed foods. And this is also from Very Well Mind. We can see here with pre-contemplation, it's the guy's not even aware, he's not even thinking about the effects of the food he eats on his body size and his heart, and the fact that might caused him to die earlier. He's not even aware of that. He's just enjoying his hamburgers, going about his life, not aware of the reasons for change. With contemplation, you can see in the middle with the pink background, now this person is starting to think, well, right now, my body is like this. If I made some changes, this is how my body would be different. This is how my feelings might be different. And I can think of for myself, would I prefer it to be that way, or am I satisfied with the way things are now? They're just contemplating, just thinking about it, struggling with ambivalence. In the next one, preparation, stage 3, you can see the person now, they become interested enough and they become aware of the reasons for change and the benefits of change enough to actually start doing some preparation or gathering information and what they need to really solidify their plans for change. So in this graphic, the guy's reading a book on health tips. Step 4, action. Now he's actually getting outside. He's literally taking some steps towards making change. He's increasing his physical activity. Once that behavior change of either diet and physical activity or both, once those changes have been solidified and have become part of this guy's regular routine and he's feeling powerful and successful, now he's in stage 5, maintenance. Now the main tasks are to sustain the change and to hold on to the achievements and the accomplishments that you've realized during your process through the earlier stages. And finally, we have to be aware and recognize that although relapse doesn't happen for everyone, it is a natural part of the change process. People have fallback, people have slips, people have mistakes, people forget their motivation, or they go on vacation from their change for a while. So for this guy, it looks like he's against the decisions he's made to work towards improving his health. He's gone ahead and enjoyed that hamburger with French fries and maybe a big strawberry milkshake. So in a way, he has relapsed. However, this is somewhat of a setback, but it does not mean that he has forgotten all of his reasons for change, all of his experiences of being successful with change, and knowing what it takes to get him to be where he wants to be. So he's going to be very well equipped when he's ready to get back on the road to change. All right. So now we're going to go into the later 3 stages of change. This is when things get really exciting. Folks, recovery professionals, folks that work with supporting people in early recovery and sustained recovery, we often feel really challenged when we're faced with somebody in the pre-contemplation stage and the contemplation stage. It tends to start feeling rewarding for us when we're working with somebody in the preparation stage and the action stage, because now they have accessed their motivation, they've set their determination, and they are interested and open to discussing and gathering what they need to be successful with change. So this is when it gets really satisfying, and you can start to notice some pretty dramatic changes in people. So for the action stage, it is when an individual starts taking definite steps, notable, significant steps towards change. But these are still in a way nascent steps. They're trying things out, but things haven't become, part of their new daily routine or habit. They haven't become completely stable in the process of change. So some examples that you might hear from somebody who's at the action stage include, I've attended a few meetings, but the longest sober stretch I have is a couple of days. So there's been some definite steps. Before, when they were at the earlier stages, they never considered attending any meetings, and they didn't even have a day of sobriety. But now they've taken some definite steps, and they're starting to see some results of their efforts. The next one, I just got out of rehab. I want to stay sober, but I still think about using all the time. So this is for somebody who's still very much in early recovery. They've made some major steps, but it's not time to sort of just pat yourself on the back and lay off the effort. The next one, I used to use about 1 gram a day, and now I'm down to just 1/4 gram. That's a drastic reduction. That is a very admirable change. That is much healthier and less harmful than using 1 gram a day. This person is definitely being active in their change process. And the final one, my counselor is teaching me lots of good relapse prevention skills. I'm doing my best. I really hope it lasts this time. So this person is actively engaged in treatment. They're actively engaged in paying attention and learning and collecting new skills that can keep them where they want to be with their change and keep them moving forward, and also equip them with skills to get back on the stages of change if they do have a relapse. So the primary task for someone at stage 4 is not only to start taking steps, start implementing some of the change strategies and accessing the support that they've identified in the preparation stage, but they're also now learning and practicing coping skills to help them manage their stress, cravings, and any other triggers that could cause them to backslide or have more difficulty with their change. So things that staff and peers can do to help someone at stage 4 is to, again, make sure that they have a realistic foundation of what to understand about the change process. There's the concept of pink cloud. When people, typically this happens in early recovery when somebody has just achieved a significant period of sobriety for the first time in a long time, or they've just graduated from 28 days rehab, and they feel great. They feel on top of the world. They feel like they got this recovery. They killed this sobriety thing. Yeah, they heard it's difficult for everyone else, but for some reason it was easy for them. This is called the pink cloud phase. So for someone in stage 4, they're likely going to start to be feeling really good and maybe a little bit cocky about their initial success. But we want to gently remind them that there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be things that make it much more difficult. There's going to be days when their motivation is lower, and it helps to prepare them for that. It also helps to assist them in identifying high-risk situations that they may want to avoid, and to develop coping strategies for those types of triggering situations that could be high risk. To help them stay on the path they want to be on. Also, somebody at the action stage has likely already identified and engaged with positive sober support. But if we can assist them in finding new reinforcers for positive change, this is the part where it's helpful to be creative and understand that even though, yeah, that person, they've said that they have a great relationship with their sponsor, they really like the meetings, knowing that if all they do is go to meetings twice a day, 5 days a week, or 7 days a week, that eventually that is highly likely to start feeling stale and boring. So if we can get creative before they lose their interest in their positive reinforcers, we can sort of have at the ready some backups and ideas for new sources of support or activities that reinforce positive change. Also at this part, the action stage is when usually, as a result of the initial steps towards change that somebody has made, they're starting to see a reduction of chaos in their lives. They don't have the emotional outbursts or the highly charged dramatic scenes with others while they're high. They're not in bed with no energy, recovering for several days after a drug binge. Things are starting to be more stable in their life. They're starting to be able to be more responsible, keep their commitments, not let others down. This is also this is also the perfect time to help somebody get connected or help them access support for family issues and also physical and mental health issues. typically we don't have such successful results with somebody in mental health counseling when they are at the pre-contemplation or contemplation stage. But once they've definitely taken some active steps towards healthier change with their substance use, that really opens up the opportunity for the mental health counseling to work, to be successful. So it's a good time. And for people who ignored their physical health during their use, this is an appropriate time to get them reconnected, reestablished with primary care. So next stage 5, maintenance. This is where somebody has really sort of graduated almost, or they're really in their last semester before they graduate. So at the maintenance stage, new behaviors and routines have effectively replaced the old behaviors. The individual has achieved their goals, is aware of the necessary work of actively working to sustain their behavior change. So at this stage, you might hear from someone, it's been a year now. I know I'll always be at risk for relapsing. I'm grounded in reality. I know that's a likely possibility, but I don't feel like I'm going to relapse. The next one, I do what I need to do to take care of my recovery every day. This is something I hear from people who are at the maintenance stage. They know in order to do my best every day and to lower my risk for relapse and lower my risk for getting off track, I need to actively do something to pay attention and check in with my recovery every day. That might be attending a meeting, doing journaling, talking with a close friend about recovery, doing things that remind you of your reasons for change and the benefits that you've experienced since you've started enacting the change. And the last one, I made the right decision to leave it all behind. It has all been replaced with much better things in my life. I like this sample quote because it reminds us that when we change and we get rid of old behaviors, or we get rid of people that weren't serving us, or things in our life that weren't benefiting us anymore, it's not enough to just get rid of them. We really do need to replace them with more positive things. We don't want people to have empty lives. We want them to be busy and engaged with healthier replacements for the things that they've worked so hard to get rid of in their life. So the primary task of the maintenance stage is not raising awareness. I'm sorry, that's wrong. I must have missed that. That it's in the PDF I sent out. The primary task for the maintenance stage is actually developing new skills for maintaining recovery. So I will try to remember to make that change before we send you the PDF. But the interventions, the activities that those supporting the individual in recovery can do to continue being helpful to somebody when they've gotten to stage 5 is to, again, help identify and help the individual or encourage the individual to try out new healthy alternative activities. Maybe now it's getting involved with a hiking group, or an online reading discussion group, or a sports league, something like that, something to keep the person's life full and to really make sure they have lots of reasons, lots of relationships, lots of activities that make it really unlikely that they're going to want to choose to use again, because they want to stay engaged with all these new healthy alternatives. It's also making sure that even though we acknowledge somebody has come a long way, somebody has really integrated all of these behavior changes, it's also about making sure that they know that you are still there, you're still available for them if they needed, if needed. So letting them know, I'm here if you need me, reach out if it gets tough. Also helping someone develop what sometimes is called an escape plan. And an escape plan is similar to a relapse prevention plan, but the escape plan is if the relapse prevention plan actually failed and somebody did have a slip up or a relapse, the escape plan is what is my plan for making sure that that relapse or that slip is as short as possible and contained? Who do I reach out to? What actions do I take? How do I get back on track if I find myself in that situation? And finally, at this stage, once somebody is doing really well and solid in the maintenance stage, it can actually also be helpful to encourage them to set and get started working on new short and long-term goals. At this point, their self-efficacy, their confidence, their feelings about their own personal individual abilities are likely to be pretty high. In order to keep them high and to keep that person developing positively and healthfully, it's often useful to encourage them to set some new goals. The new goals can be completely unrelated to the original goal for change, but it will still be, they'll all work in synergy and reinforce together. Okay, we're on the last stage, which is stage 6, which is also the stage that I can just even feel it as I'm presenting today. It's once we get to talking about stage 6, we sort of feel bad, or we feel like, oh, it would be nice to just end on maintenance and not have to discuss stage 6. But the most important thing is to be realistic and to acknowledge that relapse is a regular part of change. We can almost say that it's expected and that it's likely to happen. This stage 6 of the stages of change, in different sources, different books and websites, they refer to it in different ways. I think probably because a lot of people are uncomfortable with acknowledging that relapse is part of the stages of change. So sometimes this stage is called recurrence, and it's also sometimes called the recycling stage. So at this point, somebody has fallen back into their old behaviors. They've experienced a recurrence of their symptoms, of their addiction or dependence, and either a slip or a relapse has occurred. So things that you're likely to hear from somebody who has gone through the previous stages, but now they're finding themselves in this stage include, I was doing so well for a really long time, and then I just slipped up. He was making me so mad, I didn't even think about it, I just took a shot. So this quote, it sounds like somebody who probably did develop some coping strategies, was aware of their triggers, and was aware of high-risk situations and interpersonal dynamics, but in the moment, the coping strategies failed, weren't enough. The third one, I know I've messed up. Now I'll have to start all over again. This is a good reminder that somebody is usually feeling pretty bad about themselves, pretty embarrassed, pretty deflated when they find themselves at stage 6. Because remember, when they're in that pink cloud phase of the action stage and the maintenance stage, they're thinking, I don't know what everybody else is struggling with. I got this. I might be the only one, but sobriety seems to be coming along pretty well for me, and I can't imagine I'm ever gonna relapse. That's not me, not gonna happen. So when somebody realizes that did happen to them, it's a pretty uncomfortable fall from a high horse, I would say. It's really a humbling experience. So this, I know I've messed up. Now I'll have to start all over again. This is also the perfect opportunity, and it's very appropriate for the support person to remind the individual, yes, you'll need to start all over again. But this time you're going to take with you everything you've learned, all of the new skills you've developed with you on the journey. So you're likely to move through the cycle much faster. As it says here in the diagram with all the circles, it's really an upward spiral because you're learning from each relapse. And the last example here, at least I know what I need to do when I'm ready to get sober again next time. This is a very optimistic statement, full of hope, this is an individual that realizes that it's not going to be easy to work on getting sober again, but it sounds like they are determined that they will get sober again. And they're also aware that they have a lot of the knowledge and the skills and techniques that they're going to need. So the interventions here, I'm going to change this right now because I'm worried I'm going to forget. I'm sorry, I forgot to set this also, but the primary task of stage 6 is to cope with consequences and determine next steps. There we go. All right. And so for interventions, I didn't put this as one of the bullet points, but really one of the interventions needs to be the attitude that we bring to somebody who's at stage 6, which really should be an attitude of compassion and understanding. Our natural instinct is very likely going to be to feel very disappointed in the individual that they've relapsed, to feel very discouraged that after all of their effort and all of our effort, all of the support we provided, they're now finding themselves back at the beginning. That's very natural and understanding that we feel that way when someone's at stage 6, but it's really not productive to try to dwell in that area or to bring that energy or those attitudes to the individual. What best serves the individual who's at stage 6 and makes it more likely that they're going to feel up to starting again at stage 1 or stage 2 is embracing them with compassion and hope and even tighter support. All right, so I'm going to fix up those slides before we send them out to you. Okay, now we have about 20 minutes more, so there's not too many more slides before we get to the discussion. I just wanted to share here 2 more visualizations about the stages of change that are kind of interesting. At this point, you're pretty equipped to decipher and make sense out of these visuals on your own. So I'm not going to take too long to point out anything in these visuals, except in the yellow one from Psych Central. I just think this one is really interesting. Look at for stage 6. They don't call stage 6 the relapse or recurrence or recycling stage. They call it the termination stage, which is really interesting to me because stages 1 through 5 are exactly the same as they are described by Prochaska and DiClemente, and as I just explained them. But instead of acknowledging that there's a relapse stage, they're saying stage 6 is just termination. Stage 6 is the end of the interventions, the end of our engagement with the individual. They're fine. They're completely graduated, and that's interesting to me. I don't want to propagate that interpretation of stage 6, but I include it here just as a curiosity. So now we have, let me see here. Okay, 4 slides to go through before we get to open it up for discussion and questions. So I'm going to do this quickly to have enough time for that. There is a concept of termination with the stages of change. However, in Prochaska and DiClemente's original work, they are very clear that termination is not one of the stages of change. Termination is outside the process of change after somebody is doing well enough and stable enough that they no longer require external support to stay focused. So termination is not a stage, but it describes where someone is at when they have been successful for maintaining their healthy change for at least 1 year, and when that individual themselves feels ready to manage their life without regular engagement with the recovery community or with support. And that's a place where we should validate people for feeling where they are. That's truly an independent, free life when you feel empowered enough to manage your life and take care of your own issues without regular engagement with support. Everybody deserves to, if they feel they're ready for that, they deserve to have the experience of trying that out. And a quote that I found that is good at helping us understand the difference between the early stages of change and what it's like for somebody who's at the termination level is the difference between pre-contemplation and termination is that accurate awareness or consciousness has now replaced your lack of knowledge and understanding of your experiences, such that a full relapse is increasingly unlikely. So termination is not only when somebody is willing to try this whole life thing on their own, but it's also when so much of their previous blind spots or ignorance or lack of self-awareness, lack of insight, when all of their deficits has been replaced with knowledge and insight and understanding about themselves, that a full relapse, that a full-blown relapse that gets them way off track is increasingly unlikely. That's when we say somebody is at termination. Okay, some important points to go through really fast. Most people go through the stages several times before they are able to successfully maintain long-term changes to addictive or otherwise unhealthy behavior. There's no shame in that. Remember, it's an upward cycle. You carry with you everything you've learned on your previous cycles through the stages. Also, change is not linear. The stages of change get some criticism for making it seem like change is a very clear step-by-step progression through a process. And actually, change is not linear. Progress is rarely all in one direction through the stages. One can be at different stages on different days or even during the same day. I might wake up with a whole lot of determination and feeling that I'm getting ready for change and I'm preparing. But later in the day, I'm so down, I'm back to feeling ambivalent. I'm back in contemplation, but wondering if change is even the right thing for me. It's not necessary for an individual in recovery to understand the stages of change, to have a grasp of this model or the different steps. But I do think it can be helpful and interesting for folks in recovery to learn about the stages of change. And definitely, I think that it's helpful for support staff to understand the stages of change, because we can use it to evaluate where an individual is at. And it helps us, it gives us a guide to what interventions or what strategies might be most appropriate and effective with somebody, depending on what stage they're at. Also, because the stages of change can be applied for any type of behavioral change in our lives, it's important to remember that one can be at different stages at the same time for different substances or different behaviors. I might be in the action stage of stopping my daily marijuana use, but I'm in pre-contemplation about my physical health issues. I'm not even thinking about cutting out the cake and donuts. And I might be at the maintenance stage with my stress management change. So just recognizing that people can be at multiple stages for different issues or substances. And also a common question is, okay, we understand the 6 stages of change, but how long does each stage take? How long does somebody spend at each stage before they move on and get to the action and maintenance stage? Well, the answer is that it's highly variable. The length of time that someone spends at any one stage depends on their own individual characteristics and resources, and also the elements, the things that make up their recovery environment. Here's some more about change that I'm not going to go through too much, but it will be in the PDFs that come to you. The last part here, the purple table at the bottom, shows that based on the stage, when we can anticipate that change is going to be ready to occur, when we'll actually be able to see some results of the change. So for somebody in pre-contemplation stage 1, the change is probably at least 6 months or more out into the future. For someone in stage 2, hopefully they will be ready to start making some steps towards change in the next 6 months. By the time someone's in stage 3, that is when change is likely to be ready to happen in the near future, maybe in the next month or so. Action is about the present day action you're doing towards the change. Maintenance means that change has initiated at least 6 months ago in the past. And the final reminder that relapse can happen anytime, not respectful of schedules. All right. Then this slide is, before we get to the discussion, is just to make it clear that there is much more to the entire trans-theoretical model of behavior change than the stages of change. The stages from pre-contemplation to maintenance and relapse are the stages of change. But in the entire theory, in the entire framework by Prochaska and Di Clemente, there's many other components of it, including the processes of change and the levels of change. So there's much more to this if you're interested in looking deeper. But at this point, it's a perfect time to open it up for discussion and Q&A. So I see Brianna's ready to start fielding things that are coming in from the chat box. Here are some jumping off points. The first one is, how well do you feel the stages of change model reflects your own personal experiences with change? Can you think about behavior change that you've undertaken and think, it does seem like I went through stages 1 to 6, or maybe it was very different. Can you share a little bit about that? The next one, based on this information we've discussed today, have any new ideas come up for you about utilizing the stages of change model to support recovery in your residence, to support the residents at your recovery residence? And finally, any questions or concerns you might have about the stages of change model? Anything you think that this model might have gotten wrong? Or any reasons you think maybe we shouldn't let folks know all of that information because it could demotivate them for change? If you are comfortable, yeah, go ahead, Brianna.
Oh, I was just going to answer Angela's questions. Yeah, so we are going to send you the whole presentation. The ones that we sent out before was just a little pre-dive into it, but we will be sending out the whole slides.
It's not a real talkative group, so if anybody is more comfortable to just unmute themselves and speak freely, I would say we should be able to handle that.
Diane says it's helpful for me to know the actions I should be taking during each stage. Sometimes I'm not sure how to help folks in ambivalence. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Diane. It's important to me in any webinar that I do to try to not only share information, but to try to have folks take away some resources or some tools they can use. So not only are we going to send out a couple of, besides the slides, I'm going to ask Brianna to send 2 PDFs and a couple of links to folks that have even more tools and suggestions and some worksheets that you can use with folks who are stuck in ambivalence. Mm. This is, yeah, and this slide is going to be one that you get. It has a couple of books, a couple of workbooks, and several websites where you can get more information about stages of change. Does anybody have a response about how well you feel this model applies and reflects your own personal experiences with change, whether it's change related to substance use or any other behavior change? I see Katie has her hand up.
Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It was awesome. During the pre-contemplation phase, the first phase, I was thinking about how it's like negating cognitive dissonance with extra cognition. So it's like, I know like the person is feeling like maybe they shouldn't be doing this, right? Or someone's telling them that. And so they make statements like this is working for me for X, Y, and Z. It's just additional thoughts that people make so that they can feel better about what they like, maybe unconsciously even might feel is a behavior they shouldn't be participating in. And I know that in my experience with substance use that I definitely did the same thing. I found the most ridiculous reasons to hold on, or that attachment that you guys were talking about. And so I like the model because looking at it objectively and not subjectively, it related to an experience that was subjective. Do you see does that make sense?
Yes, in a way, it helps you make sense of a personal individual experience and know that your experience is actually broader and can be explained. Is that kind of what you're saying, Katie?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
See, there's a comment from Sabrina. She said it was interesting to see the history from where the stages of change actually came from.
Yes, I agree. It's I don't assume that everybody's going to be so interested in the history of some of these concepts and strategies. So I usually just try to keep it brief. But that's something I'm interested in too. And when I was putting this slide together, I also realized when I found the pictures of Prochaska and Di Clemente, how frequently it is that it's always white men that are behind a lot of these theories and models that we talk about today. This goes into motivational interviewing also. And that can seem sort of frustrating. But then I thought, well, on the other hand, we have reason to be optimistic and hopeful that in 20 years from now, we're going to be seeing a lot more work being spearheaded by females and people of color. But for now, the reality of the situation is that we're still working with a lot of stuff that was created by white guys. But thanks. I'm glad it's interesting to you also, Sabrina.
Angela said, my experience with treatment programs is that we expect people to go directly from action or go directly to action and set them up for failure.
Yes, there's a lot of pressure to get people to that action stage, to almost drag them to the action stage, isn't there, in treatment? So Angela, I think that you're feeling something that is very similar to what I felt, is that we all need to understand that change isn't instant. And when people do rush through the stages, it can actually be shooting themselves in the foot, because there are definite tasks that take time that need to be accomplished in order to successfully move from stage to stage. Yeah. All right, I think we better leave it there, although I really love your comments and knowing what's going on in your mind with this information, and for those of you who have shared some of your experiences with us. But I want to save time to make a couple final points, and then before I hand it over to Brianna. Brianna mentioned that there's going to be a post-webinar survey. This is so helpful when you take the time to complete it, because we can improve the content and the style of these webinars for you. Our whole goal, our whole mission is to make them interesting, relevant, and useful for you all. So especially if you have any suggestions for improvement or new ideas to try something different, it's so helpful for you to feed that to us through the surveys. Feel free to share the PDF and all of the materials that Brianna is going to send out to you. I don't mind having my name stay attached to the slides, but they're not copywritten. I'm happy to have you share them with your staff and colleagues. The video recording for this presentation is going to be available soon on the Walker website and YouTube. And you are welcome to get in touch with me either through Brianna or directly with questions, comments, suggestions, or requests. It has been my pleasure, and I'm going to hand it back over to Brianna.
Yes, thank you so much, Garrett. Yeah, the only last bit I have is we have another webinar coming up in July for managing conflict in recovery residences. So that's posted. If you hadn't got an email about it, it's actually posted under our events page on walker.org. But thank you guys all for coming. I'll be sending those slides out and resources hopefully by today, but if not, by tomorrow. So thank you so much.
Have a wonderful 4th of July and long weekend, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Roland. Bye-bye.